I was thinking about, this is an interesting community. We don't have a lot in common, really. I mean, we often assume we do, but we actually, in some ways that many faith communities talk about, we do not actually have a lot in common. There are all kinds of differences between us, those of us gathered here and those watching online. We were born in different states, some of us different countries. We were born into different kinds of families and into various faith traditions. Some we have embraced and others we have since rejected. We have spent our lives doing all kinds of work. We have different genders, different orientations, different relationship dynamics, really vastly disparate experiences of being human. We have different personality styles and life experiences and opinions on politics and social issues and religion. Now, that is not a bad thing. It's just the reality of how different we actually are. But one of the things we do have in common is that we are hopelessly temporary. We have a fixed date when we arrive, and we will have another fixed date when we depart. Most of us can probably agree on that. We all have a birthday, and we all have zero assurance on how many more of those we will get. We can probably all find commonality in our mortality. None of us are getting out of here alive. Do we have agreement on that? I mean, I want to make sure. There could be, anyone want to offer a rebuttal? You can. This is a safe place. So we're all united on that fact. But what we are less unanimously united on is from where we came and to where we're headed. Did we spring from the earth itself and will one day return to it via a purely scientific process born of time and evolution? Or are we the intentional work of some divine superhuman creator made to transcend the here to the hereafter? Are we the result of the mathematics of science or the poetry of spirituality or something in between? Are we purely organic matter that has simply changed forms over time? Or are we, as the saying goes, spiritual beings having a physical experience? Are we bodies alone, or are we souls housed in physical containers? And is our morality, what we believe and what we value, something that is the product of evolution and self-preservation, or is there some objective goodness that we all aspire to because of something beyond us? When this is over, are we destined for heaven or hell or the ground? Again, consensus today will likely be impossible. But what about the in-between time? After our arrival and before our departure, can we find agreement on the point of this beautiful, messy middle that we are sharing together? That dash between the two dates of our arriving and exiting. What are we meant to do while we're here? More and more, I see us as caretakers of the beautiful. We are present to steward humanity and nature through this relatively brief time that we have here, protecting and preserving whatever is valuable and precious to us so that it continues on. And this belief that we are caretakers of the beautiful comes from the realization that as temporary creatures, nothing belongs to us. We really don't own anything permanently because we are not permanent. Author Ryan Holiday says, "We may claw and fight and work to own things, but those things can be taken away in a second." The same goes for other things we like to think as ours, but are equally precarious. Our status, our physical health or strength, our relationships, how can these really be ours if something other than us, fate or bad luck or death and so on, can dispossess us of them without notice? Now, before in messages with you, I've shared the Viktor Frankl quote from his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And again, Frankl was in the concentration camps, and he had every reason to give up hope, but he didn't. And this quote from Frankl, he says, everything can be taken from a human being, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Frankl reminds us that we do indeed own our posture toward the world. We own our perspective, our thoughts, our values, our attitudes. Those cannot be removed from us as long as we're here. But outside of our own thoughts and choices and inner lives, nothing tangible really belongs to us, at least not forever. I recently began reading a book called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. Now, death cleaning, which I was unfamiliar with, although cleaning feels like death to me, it's the process people go through when they see the end of their lives coming. They decide what to do with all the stuff they've accumulated over the decades of being here. It's a process of throwing away, giving away, selling, or appointing everything they own before they die so they can spare their loved ones the mental and physical weight of going through decades of material things while also dealing with the death of someone they love. And that someone they love is no longer here to advise them on their wishes with all the stuff that they accumulated. It's a stark reminder that we aren't here permanently, so ownership of everything will ultimately be given up or transferred. Stop and consider for a second, friends, the transient and fleeting nature of everything we look to for security and stability. Our careers. Now, we know our careers come and go, don't they? We lose jobs, we change jobs, we start businesses, we lose them. We retire or we begin new ventures. We let go of projects and initiatives and organizations that we gave so much of ourselves to, and we lose control of whether what we did will be honored or destroyed. Now, you all know I've been pastor for years, and many of those churches I gave everything I could to try to hopefully make them into compassionate, courageous communities. But I have often realized, looking back, that sometimes some of the things I did were kept, some were changed, and some were discarded. That's just how this works. So our careers are not as permanent as we often think. Now, our children, they may be ours in the philosophical and metaphorical sense. I mean, we can claim them on our taxes for a while, right, which is great. But they're, of course, not our property. In fact, we steward them and support them until they become adults, hopefully, at which point we are not legally responsible for them, thank God. Sometimes. But we are faced with the reality that we are, for our children, guides, shepherds, guardians. But they have this amazing gift called free will, and they will get to choose their own way regardless of how we might want them to choose. Our belongings and possessions feel really important to us, but our cars and homes, though they may feel like ours, they are temporary, and they too are vulnerable to time and circumstance and deterioration. One fluke storm, one inattentive moment at the wheel, one bad bit of wiring, one rising river away from losing our treasured stuff. Our friends and our families are essential parts of our lives, but they often come and go based on proximity, life stage, personal changes, political tribalism, and death. We likely aren't friends with all the people we were 20, 15, 10, 5 years ago. Whatever felt stable and permanent in the moment of our lives actually might have turned out not to be. Author Ryan Holiday says again that all the people in our lives are on loan to us. And we don't know how long the terms of those loans are. And so we need to treat people with the respect and care befitting that reality. So in all of these cases, with our work or our children or our possessions, our families and friends, our primary job is to care well for everyone and everything we are allowed to temporarily hold while we're here. Which isn't easy, is it? It's difficult to protect beautiful, fragile things in hostile environments. Now, I talked about in this community going to our memorial service for the Parkland shooting victims years ago down in downtown Raleigh. And I talked about the service being led by young people. But the closing of the service, we all received candles, and they lit a candle, and we walked from this church through the streets of Raleigh to the Capitol building. It was a beautiful moment, but it was actually unintentionally stressful because it was rather windy with a light rain, kind of like today. And I'm carrying this candle, and I know it's symbolic, but I wanted to make sure that candle didn't go out. And I was so nervous because every step I took, the flame would move, and I would realize how vulnerable it was. So I kind of walked really careful, and I had it close to me. And it reminded me that we are caretakers of all of these fragile things. Our kids, our loved ones, this nation, and the planet. On the eve of Earth Day, we need to acknowledge and grieve that collectively we have been terrible stewards of this place. We have not been wonderful caretakers of the beautiful. We probably aren't leaving this place better than we found it. Now, a few years ago, I was in New York State where I grew up, and I was visiting family, and I decided to do what many of us do when we're back in the place we used to live. I drove by our old house. Big mistake, because I got really upset. The new occupants had cut down my favorite tree that I used to love to climb on and rest beneath. They let the landscaping go. The sidewalks were all cracked and broken, and they'd repainted the house in a really ugly color. And in general, the place was a mess. And I remember my dad had taken such great care with the lawn and the landscaping, and the new occupants just didn't seem to care. I wanted to knock on the door and say, "You really junked this place up." But I didn't. But I thought, what did they do with the home we so lovingly cared for? And that's probably a question many of us who came before us would ask if they were able to come back and visit. And I know it's a question that the indigenous tribes would rightly ask if they were here today, as they see how we've depleted this nation's resources and polluted its waters and destroyed wildlife habitat and pushed countless species to endangerment or extinction. As a people who long understood their responsibility as temporary caretakers of this place, collaborators with nature, interdependent with all living things, they would surely lament what the new occupants have done with the place they called home. I have a friend who owns a beach house, and my jealousy aside, they purchased it and renovated it in order to rent it out through services like Airbnb. And he shared with me how frustrating it was and is seeing people come in for a few days and show such little respect for the home that they've carefully curated. He's already had some nightmare renters. I don't know if any of you have ever been in that experience. But he's learning that when people don't own something, they can easily be careless with it. I remember that Jerry Seinfeld clip where they're in his series where he's trying to rent a car and the car is not there. You may remember, and he says to the woman, "You're really good at taking reservations, you're just not good at holding them." And because the car that he was promised was gone, and through some back and forth, finally they find a car, and she says, "Would you like the insurance?" And he says, "Oh yeah, because I'm going to beat the hell out of this thing." But the brevity of our time and our lack of ownership shouldn't make us irresponsible temporary residents. I'm heading up to my son's dorm next week to help him move out after freshman year, and I'm becoming very religious again. I'm praying it won't look anything like his room at home. But friends, since we are temporary and yet surrounded by so much beauty, we need to be good tenants, good neighbors, good caregivers, good caretakers, because this space and time are precious to those who will follow us. 70 to 100 years from now, this building and our homes and our towns and this nation and this planet will be occupied by people who are not us. They may not even know our names or anything about who we were, at least directly, but they will have received an inheritance from us, the place we left them. We aren't just caretakers of material things and natural resources and relationships, but we are caretakers of our values, the things that matter to us. Equality, diversity, justice, love, hope. As we have heard it framed, the bending of the arc of the moral universe, that is what's at stake in this year, in the most important election of our times. Not just the political structure, not just legislative realities we will leave to those who follow us, but the people and causes that matter to us. The kind of nation, the collective people we become. Like a bunch of strangers walking through a busy street, you and I get to be stewards of hope in times when it is most vulnerable. Like carriers of a small candle in a storm, we get to keep hope close to our chest and protect it from the winds and the weather and the stuff that threatens to snuff it out. We get to make sure at the end of our time here, there is still light left to pierce the darkness. So today, take note or make a list of whatever is beautiful in the world. The things and people and causes that are worth preserving, worth protecting, worth sustaining, and remember that everything is in our hands temporarily. It is not guaranteed to endure or persevere. No natural resource or human right or national reality is a given. Some of it will depend on what we choose in this day. So we need to choose well. We need to be compassionate and courageous caretakers of the beautiful. That's the work that I want to do, and I know that's the work we're going to do individually and collectively for the rest of the time we have here.